Today we're going to be talking about voting. So before Confederation, voting was restricted to wealthy, property-owning men, which was a small portion of the overall population. In Lower Canada, women did regularly vote for a period between 1791 and 1849. And during this time, voting was done in an open system. So what this means is that everyone voted verbally in front of everyone. So it was easy to define who was friend and who was foe. It also opened elections up to a lot of intimidations. So people, whether they may have wanted to vote for the other candidate, they felt that they were pressured into voting for a specific candidate. After Confederation, the elections were defined and run by provincial governments. So you had to be franchised in order to vote, and typically that was British males over the age of 21. The day in which you voted vary from province to province because the provinces set the date, and so by the time some provinces voted, there was already a clear winner. Briefly looking at a timeline of the right to vote federally, we see that women were allowed to vote in 1918. Now, provincially, women were allowed to vote in 1916 in Manitoba. In Quebec, women got the right to vote in 1940, and in the Northwest Territories, it didn't come until 1951. Now, the Asian Canadians were allowed to vote in 1948. The Inuit lost the right to vote in 1934, but regained the right to vote in 1950. In 1876, the Indian Act gave the First Nations the right to vote, but they had to give up their Indian status. In the year of 1960, the First Nations were allowed to vote without giving up this status. Before the Slavery Abolition Act in 1834, Black Canadians did not have the right to vote. However, once the act was passed, they were seen as full citizens and had the same rights and freedoms as other full citizens, as long as they met the age, gender, and property owning requirements. However, due to the color of their skin, they did face racism and discrimination, which prevented some of them from voting. So until 1920, the qualification regarding property was that they met a certain value of property in their name, paid rent at a certain value, or gained a certain annual income. Today's requirements, however, is that you must be a Canadian citizen, you must be at least 18 years old on election day, and you must be able to prove your identity and address. So, as we talked about, there was a lot of intimidation with the open voting system. In fact, John Cameron, who was a member of Parliament in the House of Commons in 1874, said, "Elections cannot be carried without money. Under an open system of voting, you can readily ascertain whether the voter has deceived you. Under vote by ballot, an elector may take your money and vote as he likes without detection." Today we mark off who you're voting for, and then you fold the paper up, and then you put it into a box, and no one knows who you voted for. This is called the secret ballot. So the first province to adopt this was New Brunswick in 1855, and federally it did not get adopted until 1872. Now, legend has it that Whitewood was the first location that used secret ballots in an election in the Northwest Territories. Now, this occurred in the 1894 by-election, and because not everyone was literate, the ballots were blank and their choices were indicated with colored pencils. Be sure to check out these sources to learn a little bit more about voting in Canada. And as always, thank you for joining us today, and be sure to check out the Whitewood Historical Museum.